For years, the story of the Rob Reiner family seemed to be viewed only through what the public already knew. But things began to change when a final document by Michelle Singer Reiner came to light, a personal, quiet, yet powerful record. Not an accusation nor a sensationalist revelation, but thoughts, details, and perspectives never before spoken. This report forced many to re-examine the entire story in a different, more subtle, profound, and unforgettable light. What once stunned Hollywood has now shifted to a deeper, more thought-provoking level of meaning, with a preliminary forensic report being cited as a crucial turning point. This report is said to have helped investigators narrow down the key timeline, revealing details significant enough to force even seasoned experts to reconsider their initial assumptions. According to officials, the situation escalated rapidly, but what followed doesn't appear to have been a sudden outburst. Instead, investigators believe it may have been the result of underlying tensions that had been building quietly beneath the surface for a long time. Some sources familiar with the case suggest that the events may have begun earlier at Conan O'Brien's Christmas party, attended by many entertainment industry guests. According to accounts from several people present, Nick was perceived as more tense and unpredictable than usual. What initially appeared to be a minor argument, according to these accounts, may have escalated long after the party ended, inadvertently laying the groundwork for a series of subsequent events. After leaving the event, Nick reportedly returned to the Brentwood area. Investigators described his behavior as outwardly calm, while inwardly appearing to be under tight control. Every gesture was carefully calculated. Surveillance data and witness testimony at first glance showed nothing unusual, and it was this very normality that made authorities most uneasy. Records show that he later checked into a nearby hotel, appearing calm and discreet. He paid, checked in, and left the reception desk without attracting attention. What surprised many was what happened next. Investigators confirmed that Nick quickly contacted and secured the legal services of Alan Jackson, one of America's most prominent defense attorneys. According to sources, this was reportedly done using family inheritance funds, a move that immediately raised many perplexing questions. The speed and decisiveness of that decision drew considerable attention. The Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office stated that the events inside the house are believed to have occurred sometime between midnight and dawn. There were no signs of forced entry. Investigators emphasized that the person involved was believed to have had access to the residence and was familiar with its layout. Security data subsequently showed Nick appearing at a hotel in Santa Monica around 4 a.m., about a 20-minute drive from Brentwood. The hotel staff noticed nothing unusual. No signs of panic, no emergency calls, just a man sitting quietly, seemingly detached from what was happening elsewhere. Hours later, anxiety turned into alarm when a scheduled guest arrived at the house but received no response. Calls went unanswered. The door was opened. And at that moment, everything changed completely. Authorities arrived immediately, cordoned off the scene, and quickly determined that this was not an isolated incident, but the culmination of a series of events that unfolded silently throughout the night. That same evening, at around 9 p.m., surveillance footage from an Arco gas station near Exhibition Park captured Nick buying a bottle of sports drink. He appeared somewhat restless, moving slightly, looking around, but remained calm enough to complete the transaction. At approximately 9:15 a.m., Nick was apprehended in a coordinated operation between the LAPD and federal agencies. There was no resistance, no explanation. He remained silent as he was taken away. Video footage of that moment showed a young man who appeared more emotionally exhausted than panicked. Subsequent forensic estimates suggested the couple may have died several hours before being discovered. This timeline deepened the mystery, forcing investigators to confront a key question. What truly led to that breaking point? Authorities believe Nick may have attempted to clean himself before leaving the house or later at the hotel. However, traces were still found. Surveillance cameras continued to record his movements throughout Santa Monica that morning. Experts concluded the object in question was likely a familiar item inside the house, easily accessible and unobtrusive. This particular detail only added to the chilling sense of familiarity with the setting. Subsequent forensic analysis revised the initial assumptions. Early reports suggesting a single act were reconsidered, as evidence revealed the presence of multiple more serious injuries than initially anticipated. Professor Joseph Scott Morgan, a highly regarded forensic expert, explained that in many cases the characteristics of the injuries can reflect a certain degree of intent as opposed to impulsive emotional actions. According to him, such situations are often associated with close spatial proximity, a sense of control, and a process that is not short. This is not something that can happen in just a few seconds. Another detail that particularly interested investigators appeared in some reports, suggesting the couple may have been in a state of rest when the incident began. If this assumption is correct, it would suggest a level of familiarity, an understanding of daily routines, and vulnerabilities in their private space. Investigators emphasized that actions occurring at such close proximity usually reflect a personal and controlled engagement rather than separation or chaos. Attention then quickly shifted to the subsequent events. Reports indicated that Nick allegedly used family funds to quickly secure legal representation. Public reaction was almost immediate. Attorney Alan Jackson, known for taking only the most complex and expensive cases, declined to comment when asked about the funding for his legal services. Then a significant update emerged. On December 18, 2025, multiple sources reportedly close to the family indicated that legal costs may involve the Reiner family's estate protection fund, estimated at around $200 million. According to these sources, surviving relatives believe that considering a defense based on mental health may be the most appropriate and humane course of action in the current circumstances. As the investigation continues, each new detail revealed seems to add weight to the story. What puzzles many is not just how it all happened, but also the reasoning behind the sequence of events. Some sources suggest this approach is seen as consistent with what Rob and Michelle might have wished for their son, within the framework of California law. Legally, state law stipulates that anyone convicted in such cases cannot benefit from the victim's estate, a fact that overrides any decisions related to the case. However, the law also presents other layers of complexity. While the accused cannot directly inherit, this does not automatically prohibit related individuals or estate administrators from using funds to cover legal costs. Legal analyst Sean Wessner explains that technically this might be permissible while legal proceedings are ongoing. However, he also emphasizes that this is a contentious issue with significant risks. Some experts suggest that the estate manager may have chosen not to approve these expenditures to avoid negative public reaction or future legal disputes. To date, neither the family nor the court has officially confirmed the specific source of funding for the defense. This silence only fuels further speculation. Loyalty, justice, and ethical standards seem to be clashing in real time, and neither side appears ready to offer a definitive conclusion. Then came the next major development in the proceedings. Nick Reiner made his first court appearance, facing 2 felony charges with aggravating circumstances involving multiple victims. The seriousness of the hearing was undeniable. He entered the courtroom in standard blue prison attire, a stark contrast to the privileged life once associated with the Reiner name. Standing beside him was Alan Jackson, displaying a calm, controlled, and well-prepared demeanor. The hearing was held under strict restrictions, with no live recording allowed, further increasing public attention. Jackson immediately requested a postponement of the formal trial to allow more time to determine his client's next steps. The judge agreed and scheduled the next hearing for January 7th. Until then, Nick remained incarcerated at the Los Angeles County Jail. Throughout the hearing, there was only one rare moment when the public heard Nick speak. When asked if he agreed to waive his right to a fast-track trial, he briefly replied, "Yes, Your Honor." No further explanation was given. The hearing concluded quickly, leaving behind a heavy atmosphere. As attention shifted to the January 7th hearing, investigators also revisited another troubling aspect of the story. Behind the fame and public attention lay a long history of personal struggles that Nick was believed to have faced for years, a factor that could play a crucial role in what was being uncovered. Born in 1993, Nick is believed to have begun exposure to harmful substances around the age of 15. What followed gradually formed a recurring cycle, described by many as incredibly difficult to break. Growing up surrounded by high expectations, constant pressure, and public attention, Nick's world was often said to have overwhelmed him. According to shared information, his family recognized the warning signs early on and proactively sought support. Rob and Michelle reportedly took their son to treatment facilities at a very young age, initiating a lengthy process marked by periods of progress followed by stagnation. Despite facing numerous difficulties, they never cut off contact. Instead, the family continued to provide structure and support, even allowing Nick to return to their Brentwood home, hoping that familiar surroundings could provide stability. This history now lies at the heart of the case, raising complex questions surrounding the responsibilities, boundaries, and limits of parental devotion. According to several sources, Rob spent years trying to guide Nick through creative projects, believing that purpose and work could provide a foundation. However, personal challenges persisted. The recovery process has been described as fragile, with periods of progress often short-lived. The home, once considered a safe haven, gradually became a space filled with anxiety and emotional tension. Close friends say Rob always held a consistent belief: parents never give up on their children. That devotion shaped his approach for years. However, as the situation became increasingly unstable, what has been described as a stricter parenting style ultimately led to Nick leaving and living independently. During that time, he moved between states like Maine, New Jersey, and Texas, supposedly seeking freedom and a fresh start, but frequently faced feelings of instability. There was a brief period of hope in 2015 when Nick maintained a stable enough state to join his father on the film project, Being Charlie. The film reflected similar personal experiences and was seen as a bridge to mend their father-son relationship. For a time, trust seemed to return. However, by 2018, Nick was reportedly experiencing serious difficulties again, with events leading to property damage during a turbulent period. In 2020, Rob and Michelle allowed him back home, hoping that closer supervision might be effective. According to acquaintances, their optimism gradually faded as Nick's behavior in the months leading up to the incident became increasingly unpredictable. Such a long history now hangs over the courtroom. Many believe that factors related to mental health and behavior may play a role in the defense strategy. Alan Jackson, a lawyer known for his complex cases, often focuses heavily on the mental state and ability to control behavior at the time of the incident. Some sources suggest the defense may argue that years of dealing with personal issues affected Nick's ability to regulate his behavior that night. According to reports, witnesses at the Santa Monica Hotel described Nick in a noticeably impaired state. However, investigators have emphasized a key point. These factors, if present, do not automatically exclude legal responsibility. Under California law, intentionally putting oneself in a state of impaired capacity is rarely considered a justification. At best, it can only affect the interpretation of intent, and intent is central to this case. Prosecutors are reportedly focusing on indications of premeditation and prior conflict, arguing that the behavior involved reflected awareness and control rather than confusion or accident. If evidence supports this view, the defense will face a significant challenge. In the most serious scenarios, Nick could face lengthy sentences, even life imprisonment. Even without aggravating circumstances, the sentence could range from 25 years to life imprisonment. Officials also stated there was no indication of self-defense or unintentional incident. Experts described the event as the result of intense emotions and a loss of control, rather than a random mistake. What makes the story even more noteworthy is the reputation and influence of the victims, long-standing figures in Hollywood entertainment with extensive networks. According to sources, the list of potential witnesses could include many familiar names, making this case a nationally watched event. Analysts suggest the trial may not begin until late 2026 or early 2027. The likelihood of reaching a plea deal remains uncertain. According to published forensic results, Nick was directly present at the scene through a combination of biological evidence and CCTV footage. Age is also considered a key factor in the prosecution's argument. Rob and Michelle were older, while Nick was only 32 at the time. Prosecutors plan to emphasize this age difference, along with the prolonged nature of the events, as factors related to intent. From there, attention returns to the night many believe triggered the entire chain of events, the Christmas party hosted by Conan O'Brien. According to acquaintances, Rob and Michelle brought Nick along because they were worried about him. Friends said Nick's behavior had become increasingly unpredictable lately, and leaving him alone made them feel uneasy. At the party, Nick was described as not fitting in. While others chatted and laughed, he would often stand at the edge of the room, pulling his hoodie tighter and looking around. Some guests commented that Nick's energy seemed off. He approached people abruptly, asking direct and awkward questions. The tension reportedly peaked after an uncomfortable interaction with another guest before Nick suddenly left. The atmosphere in the room changed noticeably. Laughter subsided. Michelle reportedly tried to defuse the situation, while Rob quietly watched. Around 10 p.m., as Rob and Michelle prepared to leave, many noticed them whispering to each other as if worried about something. The surrounding guests could sense that something was amiss. Then the situation escalated. The noise wasn't loud enough to drown out the music, but sharp enough to draw attention. A source later said Nick had loudly accused his parents of bad-mouthing him behind his back, his voice trembling with anger. Rob tried to calm him down, keeping his voice low and reassuring. "Let's go home," he was said to have said. According to the account, Nick pushed his father aside, knocking over a small object on the drinks table. That moment immediately drew the attention of those around them. Security intervened, and Conan O'Brien quickly acted to de-escalate the situation. "It's okay. Let's go outside for some fresh air," he was said to have said. The group then headed towards the exit. Michelle held Rob's hand tightly, her face showing clear anxiety. Outside, the cold December air was upon them. Rob led Nick toward the car, trying to speak calmly, keeping himself close to him. Michelle stood a few steps away. Witnesses said Nick paced back and forth near the front door, his hands clenched, trembling, and arguing in short bursts. He reportedly shouted a few incomprehensible words before finally getting into his car and slamming the door shut. The Reiner family left in silence. For most of the guests, it was just an awkward moment that everyone thought would pass. But for Rob and Michelle, that return home was the beginning of tense final hours. Neighbors in Brentwood later reported hearing distorted voices and small arguments around midnight. At the time, nothing seemed alarming, just a typical family quarrel. The following morning, the house became the focus of a sensational Hollywood investigation. Investigators believe the trip home was tense. Nick reportedly continued to accuse his parents of shaming him. Rob tried to defuse the situation, advising him to calm down and rest. However, once inside the house, the confrontation didn't subside, but seemed to intensify. Forensic experts suggest that sometime between midnight and dawn, Nick may have entered the master bedroom where his parents were resting. What led to that moment remains unclear. Was it anger, a mental breakdown, or something more complex? What happened afterward was described by investigators as extreme and particularly disturbing, and this is what made handling the case so incredibly difficult. What haunted many most was that night had begun so normally. Close friends say Rob and Michelle had entered a rare phase where they dared cautiously hope for Nick's recovery. After years of struggle, they believed that recent treatment, along with more consistent medication, might be bringing some stability. Rob, who always believed in the power of creativity as a path to healing, had even begun talking about the possibility of the two of them working together on a new project, not as a favor, but as a way to reestablish connection and purpose. For them, it wasn't blind optimism, but a fragile belief forged after so much disappointment. No one could have imagined that things could take such a different turn in such a short time. When the news broke, the shockwave spread almost immediately. Initially, the news emerged as cautious whispers within the entertainment industry, then quickly escalated into undeniable confirmation. Hollywood was stunned. Social media was flooded with tributes, shared messages, and unanswered questions as colleagues, friends, and fans tried to comprehend how a family considered so close-knit and loving could be torn apart overnight. Public attention shifted to Nick, not just to find simple answers, but to understand his mental state, the warning signs that might have appeared, and whether anything had been missed. Old interviews resurfaced, carrying with them words that were once considered fleeting, but now carried immense weight. In one instance, Nick had said he felt like he was born into a spotlight he never expected. In the current context, that statement is no longer just a personal reflection, but a haunting piece in the larger picture. As investigators continue to piece together details, from surveillance camera footage and forensic documents to witness testimonies at the dinner party that night, the timeline gradually becomes clear. Erratic behavior, heated arguments, sudden departures, each element, when considered individually, might easily be overlooked. But when placed together, they begin to form a more logical, albeit heartbreaking, sequence of events. However, even as the technical pieces gradually fit together, deeper questions remain. These are questions not only for the investigating authorities, but for society as a whole, about the responsibility of the family, about the boundary between love and protection, and about how far a parent's love can last before reaching insurmountable limits. Many psychologists consulted by the media describe the situation as a perfect storm, where long-standing instability, years of accumulated emotional turmoil, and unresolved traumas collided simultaneously with unintended consequences. Even Conan O'Brien, who rarely comments publicly on private matters, issued a brief statement expressing deep sorrow and disbelief at what had happened. That statement, though short, reflected the shared sentiment of a community grappling with a loss beyond comprehension. Nearly a year later, the case continues to make headlines, not just as an unresolved legal saga, but as a psychological scar on Hollywood. What should have been a warm, reunion-filled December holiday season has become the beginning of one of the darkest and most haunting chapters in modern entertainment history. This story serves as a stark reminder that success, fame, and status offer no immunity to inner turmoil, and that some families, despite showering them with love, patience, and hope, still face irreparable losses. Thank you for watching the video. If you found the content helpful, please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. For years, The story of Rob Reiner's family was told through rumors, fragmented pieces, and unconfirmed theories. The public thought they understood some of the truth until his son spoke out for the first time and completely shattered that picture. What was revealed not only stunned listeners, but also showed that things were far more complex, dark, and serious than previously speculated. Before delving into this shocking confession, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next surprising behind-the-scenes Hollywood stories. I don't even care if someone calls me Sally. I'm a snail, and I'll never fail. And you know what? You'll have to bail me out of jail eventually. Legendary filmmaker Rob Reiner and his wife were attacked in their own home, a place that should have been absolutely safe and impenetrable. It wasn't a stranger, nor a random break-in. It originated from someone close to them, someone they trusted, and that fact turned their world upside down. Rob Reiner had spent his life telling stories of love, family, and connection. Yet, his own life was quietly crumbling behind closed doors. His son, Nick Reiner, had long struggled with personal difficulties, silent burdens weighing on the entire family. But no one could have imagined how far things would spiral out of control on the eve of their collapse. Everything was completely distorted. Investigators began reviewing old statements Nick had made about his father. Looking back, those words carried a chilling undertone. They revealed warning signs that hadn't appeared suddenly, but had been simmering for a long time before things spiraled out of control. The tragic events involving Rob Reiner and his wife, Michelle Singer Reiner, occurred on a night that should have been filled with joy and a festive atmosphere. That evening, they attended a Christmas party hosted by Conan O'Brien, surrounded by friends, familiar faces, laughter, and warm lights. But beneath the cheerful atmosphere, something was amiss. Witnesses later told authorities that a heated argument had broken out between Rob and Nick, immediately drawing the attention of everyone around them. It wasn't a minor disagreement that could be ignored. The confrontation was loud, tense, and impossible to ignore. Voices rose, the atmosphere in the room shifted, and guests exchanged anxious glances as the situation escalated. Some described Nick's behavior as alarming, in a way that would haunt them long after the party ended. One guest told investigators that Nick had put the entire room on edge, an observation that quickly became a crucial piece of the puzzle as the chain of events leading to the tragedy began to piece together. Sometimes I just go outside to gather my sick thoughts. In that situation, Rob neither avoided nor escalated the tension. He confronted it directly, trying to remain calm and control the situation. Michelle was always by his side, both united and supportive, preventing things from exploding in front of the crowd. When they left the party, there was no sign of panic or haste. It all seemed deliberate, as if the two parents were choosing to resolve the issue privately rather than turn it into a public spectacle. To onlookers, it looked like a last-ditch effort by two people trying to protect their family and regain control before things went too far. But that same night, Rob had a phone call with Eric Idle, and his tone was completely different, signaling that what was happening behind closed doors was far more serious than it appeared. According to Eric, the conversation between the two was so calm, almost serene, filled with optimism and completely focused on the creative plans ahead, especially the sequel to Spinal Tap, a project that had been awaited for years. There was no sign of panic, tension, or fear in Rob's voice. He sounded energetic, spoke coherently, and exuded excitement and confidence in the future. Listening to that call alone, no one could have guessed that just hours later, his life would take a completely different turn. However, behind that calm exterior lay a deep-seated unease that Rob only dared to confide in private. Before that fateful night, he had confided in a few close friends about a fear that had tormented him for a long time. He feared his own son. It wasn't a statement born of anger, nor was it the outburst of a father's frustration. It was the real, silent, and persistent fear of someone feeling powerless to prevent increasingly unpredictable behavior from spiraling out of control. Rob understood that something was veering off course, but he couldn't know how far it would go. This deeply ingrained fear cast a dark shadow over the family's return home that night, despite the outward appearance of everything being perfectly normal. The following morning, something unimaginable happened inside the Reiner family home in Brentwood. The Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office later confirmed the incident occurred before dawn, though the exact time couldn't be determined with absolute certainty. For hours, the house was silent. By mid-afternoon, this unusual silence finally became alarming. Romy Reiner, their daughter, who lived across the street, decided to check on them after being unable to contact her parents. As soon as she stepped inside, she immediately sensed something was wrong. The atmosphere was heavy, unlike any other day. This unsettling feeling prompted her to call for help without hesitation. Medical personnel and LAPD officers quickly arrived at the scene. Inside the house, both Rob and Michelle were found unconscious. The situation was serious enough for authorities to immediately cordon off the entire area, treating it as a particularly serious domestic crime from the outset. Every detail was carefully recorded because the more they observed, the more perplexing the overall picture became. One crucial detail quickly shifted the direction of the investigation. There were no signs of forced entry. All doors and windows were intact, not pried open or disturbed. No belongings had been ransacked, and there were no signs of external intrusion. This led investigators to a chilling conclusion. The perpetrator was not a stranger. The person was already inside the house, welcomed in completely voluntarily. Neighbors were questioned, but none had heard any unusual noises during the night. No screaming, no sounds of struggle, no alarms sounded. In the quiet Brentwood neighborhood, where even the slightest noise could be noticed, this prolonged silence became the most disturbing detail. It suggested that everything had happened quietly, in control, and not as chaotic as one might imagine. Investigators concluded that anyone moving around the house at that time had done so very cautiously and deliberately. There were no signs of a violent struggle, no mess, just controlled movements, the kind of behavior that could only come from someone familiar with the space, knowing every passageway, every room intimately. As the pieces of time began to piece together, attention quickly focused on Nick Reiner. According to police records, Nick left the house shortly after the incident and went to the Pierside Hotel in Santa Monica early that morning. Hotel staff later recounted that he behaved completely normally. Nick checked in calmly, spoke clearly, and showed no signs of tension or panic. No trembling, no awkwardness, no noticeable signs of instability. This composure, in the context of the events, became inexplicably suspicious. After Nick checked out, investigators searched the room and reportedly found evidence directly linking him to what happened at the Brentwood house. This discovery immediately placed Nick at the center of the investigation. He had only stayed at the hotel for a short time, then quickly left, moving constantly as if he didn't want to stay in one place for too long. Later that day, security cameras captured Nick at a gas station near Exposition Avenue and Vermont Avenue. The footage showed him calmly entering, choosing a drink, paying, and leaving without hesitation. No rush, no anxiety, no sign of fear, just a cold composure, making the whole story even more somber and chilling in retrospect. Everything about his demeanor exuded calmness, control, and complete normalcy. This composure created a terrifying paradox, as it was the complete opposite of what investigators believed had happened beforehand. Around the evening of December 14th, police located Nick near the exhibition park, just steps from the University of Southern California campus. The area was quickly sealed off in a tense but tightly controlled arrest operation, taking place right in front of onlookers. Nick resisted. He didn't try to escape. He remained absolutely silent and obeyed every police order. Within minutes, he was handcuffed and arrested without any struggle or drama. No shouting, no chaos. Only a heavy silence as the handcuffs closed, a cold stalemate to the unfolding events. By the end of that night, investigators were no longer simply speculating. They began piecing together the clues, each disjointed piece gradually forming a disturbing picture that stretched across Los Angeles. A violent argument, a house shrouded in an eerie silence, no signs of forced entry, a disappearance lasting hours, and an unusual route extending from Brentwood to Santa Monica and beyond. However, one haunting question refused to disappear. What truly happened inside that house? It was from this point that the case entered a much darker and more complex phase. After the Brentwood house was sealed off, forensic teams were deployed and worked tirelessly. They proceeded methodically, determined to uncover what witness testimony and the neighborhood's silence couldn't explain. Every room was examined, every surface scrutinized, no detail was overlooked. One of the most crucial tasks was determining the precise chronological order of events. With no security cameras inside the house and no clear landmarks, investigators were forced to rely entirely on forensic science. Environmental temperature, physical signs, and microscopic traces all became crucial clues. The chilling question that guided the entire investigation was, when and how did Rob and Michelle Reiner die? To answer, experts focused on the remaining signs on their bodies. Rigor mortis and blood clots became decisive factors in estimating the time of death. The conclusion reached sent shivers down everyone's spine. Forensic officers determined that both Rob and Michelle had died in the early morning hours, nearly 12 hours before they were discovered. This timing eerily matched the detectives' initial suspicions, based on their travel routes and the indirect testimony of those involved. The tragedy occurred during the quietest hours of the night, when the entire neighborhood was asleep, unaware of the horror unfolding behind closed doors. That silence was not only terrifying but also decisive, indicating that everything unfolded without interruption. The investigation then shifted to analyzing the injuries. Forensic experts noted numerous sharp object wounds, suggesting this was no accident or a remote act. These wounds appeared at very close range, indicating a direct, close-quarters confrontation with continuous and deliberate contact. This detail added a dark depth to the case, raising grim questions about the level of tension and control in those final moments inside the house. What truly astonished the investigators was not only the nature of the wounds, but also their number and repetition. The evidence suggested the event didn't end in a flash. It lasted much longer than imagined, with enough intensity to stun even seasoned forensic experts. This wasn't a single, spontaneous outburst, nor a random, chaotic act. Every trace reflected a continuous, controlled, and uninterrupted sequence of actions. From a legal perspective, the repetition was crucial. The investigators weren't relying on emotion or subjective speculation. They were reading the evidence. And in this case, the evidence clearly indicated a deliberate element, a decision to continue acting rather than to stop. This is what shaped how the case was viewed from the outset. Following these findings, Nick Reiner was officially charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, each against a separate victim. Under California law, this is the most serious level of prosecution, applicable only to cases involving clear premeditation and intent. However, prosecutors didn't stop there. They added special circumstances due to the multiple victims, an element that immediately escalated the case to the highest possible legal level. This wasn't just a procedural detail, it completely altered the course of the case. With these aggravating circumstances, the potential legal consequences became extremely severe. If convicted, Nick could face life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, or even the harshest penalty under the law, depending on the final court ruling. The Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office asserted that these were the strongest charges they could bring, while expressing absolute confidence in the forensic findings and the legal basis of the case file. At that point, the case officially crossed the line from a family tragedy to one of the most intense legal battles the city had seen in years. Investigators now had a relatively clear timeline, a logical sequence of events, a confirmed cause of death, and evidence of prolonged close contact. When Nick first appeared before the judge, the weight of the entire story immediately enveloped the courtroom. The atmosphere became heavy and suffocating. The silence, the stares of those present, even the simple clothes he wore that day, sent shivers down many people's spines. This was no ordinary hearing. It was a turning point from which there was no turning back. On the morning of the first hearing, Nick Reiner was escorted into the courtroom in Los Angeles. Until then, the public had only known about the case through press releases and brief news reports. Now, things had entered a new phase, a phase of public law, where every word became part of a permanent record. The courtroom was under tight security. No cameras, no live broadcasts, no form of recording was permitted. Only a very limited group of reporters, lawyers, and court officials were allowed to witness the proceedings inside. These restrictions were not accidental, but reflected the sensitivity and seriousness of the case. Everyone was in position before Nick entered, maintaining a solemn and silent demeanor throughout the hearing, a clear affirmation that this was a case of extraordinary weight, far exceeding what the public had initially imagined. When the final doors opened and Nick Reiner entered, the deputy sheriffs immediately escorted him straight to the defense table. The atmosphere in the courtroom became tense. A voice rose, soft and hesitant, as if trying to catch its breath after so much to say, but then stopped before going into any detail. The room fell into absolute silence again. Every step, every glance, every slightest movement was scrutinized. The heaviness was palpable, not only because this was the first legal procedure, but because this moment marked the point where Brentwood's simmering mystery officially became a public confrontation before the judge. Almost immediately, all eyes focused on Nick's attire. It was a protective gown, the kind usually only seen in high-risk detention situations. The gown was too obvious to ignore. Yet, no one spoke. The judge didn't mention it. The lawyers didn't mention it. The trial continued as if the detail didn't exist. That very silence became a heavier message than any explanation. When the proceedings began, the courtroom was almost silent. The charges were read aloud in a cold, decisive legal tone. 2 counts of first-degree murder, one involving his father, the other his mother. There was no emotion, no explanation, just the words of the law falling, line by line, with an undeniable weight. When the judge asked Nick if he understood his rights, he responded briefly, calmly. That was the only time he spoke during the entire hearing. No justification, no questioning, no reaction to the gravity of what had just been read. Nick sat motionless, his gaze fixed straight ahead, his face blank as if he had detached himself from the moment. That intense focus carried a sense of restraint, unpredictability, making it impossible for those watching to discern his thoughts. After the reading of the charges, the hearing moved on to the next steps. The defense attorney requested a postponement of the defense statement to allow more time to prepare. The judge readily agreed. The prosecution did not object. There was no debate, no dramatic tension, just the cold, precise execution of legal procedures. As the hearing concluded, one thing became clear. This case was only just beginning. The tension in the room spoke volumes, even without anyone speaking further. Then another detail stunned the onlookers. Standing beside Nick was his defense attorney, Alan Jackson. That name alone carried a special weight in the legal world. Jackson was not a random choice. He was a seasoned lawyer, renowned for representing high-profile, highly controversial cases under intense public scrutiny, having defended some of the most notorious figures over the years. His appearance sent an unmistakable message. This wasn't a temporary strategy or a short-term solution. It was a meticulously planned, calculated preparation for a protracted legal battle where every detail would be scrutinized, every line of evidence challenged. When all formalities were complete, Nick was let out in the same way he had entered, silently, cautiously, without glancing at the press. No statements were made, neither from the prosecution nor the defense. Inside the courtroom, reporters could only whisper to each other, trying to process what they had just witnessed. A few minutes later, the room was almost empty again, as if nothing unusual had happened. But outside those walls, the real commotion was beginning to rise. By that same afternoon, public attention had quickly focused on a burning question, repeated everywhere. Who was paying for this defense team? Those familiar with the legal world understood the harsh reality. A case involving 2 counts of first-degree murder with extraordinary circumstances was almost certain to drag on for years. It required the involvement of a host of experts, from forensic experts and psychologists to independent investigators, along with countless complex legal procedures before the trial officially began. Costs therefore skyrocketed. Millions of dollars could be spent very early on, even before the jury was selected. Many estimates suggest that simply preparing a defense strategy of this scale could easily exceed $1 million. This is where the ambiguity becomes even more perplexing. Nick Reiner has no stable occupation or known source of income sufficient to explain the payment of such a massive legal fee. This gap immediately fueled speculation. Whispers spread rapidly in the media. Some sources suggested the money might be related to the Reiner family's assets being used for the defense, a hypothesis that immediately added another layer of unease to an already tense case. Almost simultaneously, new questions began to surface outside the courtroom. Was the use of family assets in this case legal? Inheritance law experts quickly analyzed that this was no simple matter. In some circumstances, shared or inherited property may be permitted to cover legal costs. In other cases, such action can lead to intense disputes, protracted legal battles, or opposition from remaining family members. It all depends on how the property is structured and who actually holds control. However, inside the courtroom, none of that was mentioned. The judge did not question the source of the money. The defense offered no explanation. Officially, the issue was not recorded at all. Conversely, outside the courtroom, the story unfolded in a completely different way. The debate quickly spread among the public. Some argued that anyone, no matter how serious the charges, has the right to access the best possible defense. Others felt deeply uneasy at the thought that family resources might be being used to protect the accused. While the internal legal process remains cold, tight, and procedural, elsewhere, emotions are simmering. Even within Reiner's family, the situation is reportedly very tense. Sources reveal that not all relatives are solely focused on punishment, and underlying rifts may continue to widen. Instead, they want Nick to receive serious mental health treatment alongside the criminal proceedings. For them, this story isn't simply about legal accusations. It's the result of years of pent-up, unresolved issues that have finally spiraled out of control. The case is no longer confined to legal provisions or dry case files of evidence. It touches on deeper questions about family responsibility, moral boundaries, and how true justice should be understood. However, all of this remains speculation. No official reports have been confirmed. No records, no sworn statements, no independently verifiable documents. On the other side, the prosecution's position remains completely consistent. They firmly maintain that the evidence gathered is strong enough to support the most serious charges. The prosecutor emphasized the extreme seriousness of the incident, as well as Nick's subsequent actions, arguing that all met the necessary legal criteria. Because the case involved more than one victim, the options for punishment were narrowed to the absolute minimum. If convicted, under current regulations, Nick Reiner could only face two possibilities: life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, or the harshest penalty the justice system allows. There were no mitigating circumstances for charges at this level. The case had reached the highest possible level of seriousness. Meanwhile, everything continued quietly behind the scenes. Detectives continued to scrutinize every minute detail. Lawyers quietly adjusted their strategies, and unreleased information was only circulated within a very limited circle among those directly involved in the investigation. Everyone understood that the next phase would be far more tense and difficult. The courtroom seemed quiet, but beneath the surface, pressure was building day by day. And gradually, one thing became clear: Nick Reiner couldn't remain silent forever. Soon, attention began to shift to things he had said long before the case came to light. Those seemingly harmless remarks now carried a completely different weight. They began to reshape how many people perceived the whole story. Nick had publicly spoken about his childhood, admitting that he never truly felt close to his father, Rob Reiner. He described a quiet but persistent emotional distance that profoundly affected how he perceived his role in the family. Nick recounted that he often felt like an outsider, even in his own home. He watched others connect, laugh, and share intimate moments, while he silently stood on the sidelines, unsure how to fit in. According to those around him, Rob Reiner was always seen as a devoted father, successful, present in his children's lives, caring and insightful. He devoted much time to his family, building close relationships with his children through shared habits, interests, and experiences. However, for Nick, those spaces of connection never truly belonged to him. The house appeared stable and complete from the outside, but inside, a sense of distance persisted. Not because Rob ignored or abandoned him, but because there was an invisible void that was never filled. Conversely, he tried to give his son everything he could. However, long working hours and the pressure of success sometimes inadvertently created subtle emotional voids. Nick grew up surrounded by care and love, but he later admitted that this care didn't always reach him. That feeling of quiet isolation lingered for years, silently building within him. As he grew older, instead of feeling safe and secure in his own home, Nick began seeking a sense of belonging elsewhere. He was drawn to environments that promised escape rather than stability. It was during this period that substance use crept into his life. Initially, it was just small experiments, but it quickly spiraled out of control. By his mid-teens, Nick's condition had become so severe that it required professional intervention. His family didn't shy away from or deny this reality. They constantly sought help, trying everything to pull him out of the ever-tightening cycle. Later, Nick admitted that the substances were devastating, trapping him in a repetitive cycle that became increasingly difficult to escape. Each time he showed signs of improvement, hope flickered within the family. But then subsequent relapses extinguished it all, leaving behind a lingering weariness and helplessness. These unresolved struggles would gradually be viewed from a completely different perspective. Each time Nick thought he had found a foothold, the subsequent fall was even more devastating. His life continued to be precarious and unstable. He moved constantly between states like Maine, New Jersey, and Texas, often without a fixed residence, structure, or clear direction. These weren't positive turning points or new beginnings, but rather periods of chaotic and uncertain survival. Throughout that time, Rob and Michelle Reiner never turned their backs on their son. They were always present, always there for him, and never gave up hope. Over the years, they spoke openly about Nick's struggles, not blaming circumstances, not hiding the truth, and not shirking their own responsibility. They poured everything they had into it: time, patience, love, and resources. From treatment programs and constant support to phone calls and giving him another chance whenever he stumbled. At one point, Rob decided to try a different path. He introduced Nick to his world of filmmaking, hoping that creative work could become a bridge. In 2015, father and son worked together on Being Charlie, a film directly inspired by Nick's own experiences and struggles. For a brief period, things seemed to shift in a different direction. Nick's life became clearer, more structured, purposeful, and filled with a sense of direction he hadn't been able to maintain for long before. Family members said he seemed more stable, more focused, as if finally something strong enough was holding him back to reality. But that fragile balance didn't last. Old habits returned. Aloofness, unpredictable moods, and successive breakdowns followed one another. Each subsequent failure was more devastating than the last. Not only did it wear down Nick, but it also exhausted those who tried to be there for him. Over time, the family's anxiety went beyond mere recovery. It turned into fear. What had once seemed within their control was now slipping away. Family members said their greatest concern wasn't just what would happen to Nick, but whether everyone else was safe. The emotional distance Nick had spoken of since childhood was never truly healed. Love was always accompanied by guilt, hope intertwined with disappointment. Time and time again, the family tried to connect, but there always seemed to be an invisible, insurmountable barrier. The tension wasn't a surprise. It had been building for years, simmering and heavy. The argument at that Christmas party wasn't random. It was the culmination of all the unresolved issues. In the days that followed, the Reiner family only spoke out through a joint message from Romy and Jake. They didn't discuss legal matters, nor did they address the widespread speculation. Their words revolved around grief, shock, and love for their family. They asked for privacy, and since then, they have kept that promise. No interviews, no public appearances. A private memorial service was held afterward. No cameras, no noise, no fanfare. Just remembrance, connection, and quiet moments of reflection. Across Hollywood, tributes poured in, not only for Rob's career, but for the man himself. A man who always exuded a sense of stability, a trustworthy leader, a man who made those around him feel safe to be creative and be themselves. And now, the question is for you. What do you think really happened behind those doors? Do you believe Nick Reiner is entirely responsible, or are there hidden aspects yet to be seen? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you found this analysis helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more in-depth analyses of Hollywood's most shocking cases. Rob Reiner's son has finally told the truth, and it's more shocking than you can imagine. In this video, we'll delve into the details, uncover previously unknown secrets, and explore why this story has shaken both Hollywood and the public. If you want to follow the whole story and not miss the most honest analysis, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications now. You won't want to miss any important details. Legendary filmmaker Rob Reiner and his wife, Michelle Singer Reiner, were once known as the epitome of an ideal Hollywood family. They lived in a cozy Brentwood home filled with laughter, affection, and cherished memories. Rob Reiner, with decades of storytelling about love, family, and loyalty, inspired millions worldwide. Michelle Singer Reiner, his wife of many years, was known for her compassion and devotion to her family. But behind the smiles and the dazzling lights of Hollywood, the truth about their family life gradually revealed a heartbreaking picture. Their son, Nick Reiner, had faced personal struggles for years. These challenges not only directly affected Nick's mental health, but also created an invisible but heavy burden on the entire family. Family and friends had noticed signs of tension, but no one could have imagined things would escalate to such a terrifying level in one night. The night of December 13, 2025, should have been a night filled with joy and festive atmosphere. Rob and Michelle attended a Christmas gathering hosted by Conan O'Brien, where they gathered with friends and family. The setting was warm, filled with laughter and twinkling lights, but beneath the cheerful facade were signs of tension that few noticed. According to guests, the conversation between Rob and Nick began to escalate into a heated argument. Their voices grew louder, the tension increased, overshadowing the cheerful atmosphere, and many guests exchanged worried glances. Some described Nick's behavior as unpredictable and haunting, and they later admitted that the shift in energy haunted them for a long time. Despite the tense situation, Rob remained calm. He tried to soothe his son's anger and keep the party from descending into chaos. Michelle was always by his side, supporting and protecting him in every situation. When they left the party, many witnesses saw only a family gently guiding their son out of an awkward situation, with no signs of haste or drama. That same day, Rob continued to participate in work calls, discussing the sequel to Spinal Tap with Eric Idle, speaking in an optimistic and focused tone. But deep down, he admitted to friends that he feared his son, not out of anger, but out of a feeling of helplessness and not knowing what to do to control the situation. The real tragedy occurred in the early morning of December 14th. Their daughter, Romy Reiner, who lived just across the street, after several unsuccessful attempts to reach him by phone, decided to visit. Upon entering the house, she immediately realized something was wrong and called emergency services. Rescue forces arrived quickly, but Rob and Michelle were found unconscious and beyond saving. The house was immediately sealed off for a thorough investigation. Investigators quickly noticed a strange detail. There were no signs of forced entry, no signs of disturbance or tampering. Everything in the house was intact, from furniture and belongings to the doors and windows. This indicated that whoever was involved had been in the house voluntarily or had been welcomed, completely changing the direction of the initial investigation. These seemingly small details became crucial. The absolute silence, the absence of strange noises, no screaming, in a neighborhood known for its quietness and sensitivity to sound, were signs that seasoned detectives could not ignore. A close source revealed that Nick Reiner had previously had to change his medication for schizophrenia, This change in medication significantly affected his behavior, mood, and self-control, leading to an increase in abnormal signs. Nick's previous statements, in retrospect, seemed like silent warnings that went unnoticed. But now, every detail contributes to revealing a heartbreaking picture of that fateful night. Big questions begin to pile up around Nick Reiner. What happened that night? Could anyone have prevented the tragedy before it occurred? The sights, sounds, and even the silence in the house all become crucial clues for the investigators. Every detail, from the argument before the party to the eerie silence in the house, raises a single question. How did a seemingly perfect family fall into such a horrific night? Rob and Michelle Reiner's story is not just a family tragedy, but also a reminder of the pressures we often overlook, the unforeseen power of silence, and the unexpected secrets it can hold. As the truth unfolds, both Brentwood and the public question, what really happened, and can we truly understand the mysteries behind the seemingly impenetrable facade of the Reiner family? According to sources, immediately after the tragic night in Brentwood, Nick Reiner left his family home around 4 a.m. on December 14th. His journey in the following hours began at the Pierside Hotel in Santa Monica, where he checked in completely calmly. Hotel staff told police that there were no signs of anything unusual about his behavior. No trembling hands, no tension, no confusion, clear and coherent speech, and he appeared to be in complete control. This very calmness further puzzled investigators, as it was in stark contrast to what had happened inside the house just hours earlier. After leaving the hotel, investigators searched the room and found some crucial evidence directly linked to the events in Brentwood. This discovery placed Nick in the correct position within the investigation's timeline, even though his stay at the hotel lasted only a few hours. Shortly afterward, Nick continued his swift disappearances, moving as if unwilling to linger, and this behavior was observed throughout the day, creating a mysterious chain of clues. At the end of the day, surveillance cameras captured Nick at a gas station near the intersection of Exposition Boulevard and Vermont Avenue. The video showed him entering, buying a drink, paying, and walking out calmly, unhurried, unconcerned, almost indifferent to everything around him. This image seemed to completely contradict what was happening in the investigation, prompting authorities to carefully consider his motives and mental state. Around 9:15 p.m., police tracked Nick near Exhibition Park, just steps from the University of Southern California campus. A carefully planned arrest operation was launched, with flashing lights and a presence of multiple patrol cars. Nick did not resist, complied with instructions, and was peacefully apprehended. This image once again underscores the contrast between the outwardly calm demeanor and the tragic events unfolding inside the house in the early morning. Meanwhile, forensic teams meticulously examined the Brentwood home. With no cameras inside or clear timestamps, experts relied entirely on physical evidence and forensic science to determine the sequence of events. They focused on physical indicators, identifying marks, and the elasticity of artifacts to estimate the time of the events. The results determined that Rob and Michelle Reiner likely died in the early morning of December 14th, nearly 12 hours before they were discovered. Investigators also noted several anomalies surrounding the events. The house was quiet, there were no signs of forced entry, belongings remained in their original positions, and Nick's death was swift but controlled. This sequence of events suggests that every action was carried out by someone familiar with the surroundings, creating a haunting picture. Information from medical sources also indicates that Nick Reiner's mental health had deteriorated recently. New medications used to regulate his mental state appear to have had a negative impact, increasing behavioral erratic behavior. Experts say mood swings from depression to mania, along with acute psychotic episodes, made behavioral control extremely difficult and revealed a gap in the mental health care system. Overall, the sequence of events from leaving Brentwood to the Santa Monica Hotel, the gas stations, and finally his arrest that same evening shows a contradictory yet clearly defined pattern of behavior. The outwardly calm demeanor, set against the backdrop of the heartbreaking events unfolding inside the house, has led investigators and the public to repeatedly question what really happened and who is responsible for this tragedy. With physical evidence and forensic analysis, Nick Reiner was formally charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, each against a separate victim, his parents. This is the most serious charge under California law, applicable to cases involving intentional and potentially premeditated acts. Aggravating factors, including the involvement of multiple victims, elevated the case to the highest level of severity, directly impacting the trial process and future sentencing. This case is not only a family tragedy, but also reflects serious challenges related to mental health, social responsibility, and the healthcare system. Nick's uncanny composure, his mysterious movements, and the forensic clues have woven together a heartbreaking story that haunts all of Brentwood and the surrounding community. By the following morning, the consequences were clear, and investigators had no choice but to reconstruct the entire sequence of events based on the remaining physical evidence in the house. The quiet space of Brentwood had now become a crime scene where every small detail could reveal the truth. Forensic experts quickly swung into action, examining every room, every nook and cranny, from bloodstains and fingerprints to surrounding objects. Each discovery was carefully documented and analyzed from a scientific perspective, aiming to accurately recreate the sequence of events that unfolded on that fateful night. The forensic data showed that the incident was not a spontaneous act. The actions were carried out continuously, step by step, with clear calculations and a certain degree of repetition, creating a complex behavioral pattern. Experts emphasized that from these patterns, they could deduce the intentions, motives, and level of planning of the perpetrator. Thanks to these detailed analyses, the complete picture of what happened inside the quiet house gradually unfolded, layer by layer, revealing the horror hidden beneath the seemingly normal exterior. Based on the investigation results and forensic report, Nick Reiner was officially charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, each corresponding to a single victim, his parents. Under California law, this is the most serious charge, applying to premeditated and intentional acts. Furthermore, prosecutors added aggravating circumstances involving multiple victims, elevating the case to the maximum severity level, directly impacting the trial process and potential punishment. If convicted, Nick could face life imprisonment without parole or other severe penalties, depending on the court's decision. The Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office asserted that this was one of the most serious cases they had ever handled, emphasizing the importance of forensic evidence, which played a crucial role in reconstructing the entire sequence of events. Investigators reconstructed the events of that fateful night. A late-night confrontation, the unusual silence in the house, the unsettling movements recorded in reports, and the physical signs reflecting escalating tension, from cracks and marks on the floor to moved objects. Everything was meticulously prepared and arranged to become crucial evidence in court. Every piece of data, from documents to physical objects, was analyzed in detail to ensure each piece of evidence could be presented to the court as accurately and convincingly as possible. On the morning of December 17, 2025, Nick Reiner made his first court appearance in Los Angeles. The atmosphere inside the courtroom was so tense and serious that it seemed every breath, every step was being recorded. Silence enveloped the room, broken only by the rustling of papers or the footsteps of court officials. The trial marked a crucial turning point. From a private family tragedy, the case had become a public legal battle, where every gesture, word, and piece of evidence would be meticulously scrutinized. The courtroom was heavily controlled. There were no cameras, no live broadcasts, and only a small group of reporters, lawyers, and court officials were allowed to witness. When Nick entered, escorted by deputy sheriffs and led to the defense table, the entire room fell into a heavy silence. Every step, every glance of his held profound meaning, reflecting the seriousness and brutality of the case. This appearance not only marked the beginning of the legal process, but also transformed Brentwood's silent mystery into a public legal drama, where every action, every word, every piece of evidence would be scrutinized and analyzed meticulously. The entire legal community, the media, and the public focused their attention on the trial's developments, while the haunting question remained: what really happened on that fateful night? The details gathered by investigators and forensic experts were only the tip of the iceberg, and all eyes were on Nick Reiner, who now faced the most serious accusations of his life. This heavy, tense, and predictable atmosphere marked the beginning of a legal phase that both the family and the public knew would be protracted, unpredictable, and challenging. When Nick Reiner entered the courtroom, one detail immediately caught the attention of everyone present. He was wearing a special suit, designed for maximum protection in high-risk situations. This type of suit is typically used in detention settings requiring strict supervision and absolute security. The presence of the suit was unmistakable, yet strangely, no one mentioned it. The judge remained silent. The lawyers were also quiet, and the hearing proceeded as if the suit didn't exist at all. When the formal proceedings began, the entire room fell silent. The charges were read aloud, clearly in formal and standard language. Nick Reiner faced 2 counts of first-degree murder, one for his father and one for his mother. There was no emotion, no explanation, only the heavy weight of the law pressing down on each witness. When the judge asked if Nick understood his rights, he answered briefly, calmly, and confirmed that he did. This was the only time he spoke during the entire hearing. He sat silently, focused, his face expressionless, staring straight ahead, his mind seemingly elsewhere. After the charges were read, the trial moved to the scheduling phase. Nick's defense requested a postponement of the preliminary hearing to allow more time to prepare the formal defense. The judge agreed, setting the next hearing date for January 7, 2026. The prosecution did not object, and the trial proceeded smoothly without interruption. However, the tense atmosphere in the courtroom made it clear to everyone that this case was only just beginning. A quiet but haunting moment occurred when everyone realized who was standing next to Nick at the defense table. That was Alan Jackson, a renowned lawyer who had handled numerous high-profile and publicly contested cases. His mere presence sent a clear message. This was not a temporary arrangement or a superficial legal move. The defense was preparing for a long, thorough legal battle where every piece of evidence, every testimony, and every detail would be meticulously examined, challenged, and analyzed. When the hearing concluded, Nick was escorted out. He walked silently, just as he had entered, without looking at reporters or speaking a word. Inside the courtroom, that moment passed quickly, but outside, the discussion of the case had only just begun. One of the big questions immediately arose: who was funding such an expensive defense? Legal experts note that first-degree cases with multiple aggravating factors like this often drag on for years, requiring the involvement of forensic experts, independent analysts, and potentially costing millions of dollars just in preparation for trial. Attention immediately shifted to Nick Reiner's financial resources. He doesn't have a clear, stable income, and the question arises as to where the resources to sustain such a large-scale defense come from. Some internal sources suggest the money may come from the Reiner family's assets, but this remains controversial and could lead to further legal challenges. Inside the courtroom, all such speculation was ignored. The court didn't ask, the defense didn't explain, and the public could only observe the tense silence of those present. The first trial has concluded, but all eyes, stories, and speculation about resources, legal strategies, and what will happen next have only just begun. Every small detail, from Nick's distinctive attire to Alan Jackson's appearance, has prompted public questioning and close scrutiny of every step of the case, foreshadowing a lengthy, complex, and dramatic legal saga ahead. But outside the courtroom, the debate quickly escalated. Some argued that regardless of the severity of the charges, everyone deserved full and strong legal representation. They emphasized a fundamental principle of law. Everyone has the right to self-defense, and the legal system must ensure fairness for all. Meanwhile, another segment of public opinion questioned the ethical aspects of the whole affair. They wondered whether using family assets to pay for such an expensive defense was truly justifiable and consistent with the spirit of justice. These debates quickly added a new layer of controversy, further complicating an already tense case. When information leaked that Reiner's family fortune could be used to defend Nick, emotions outside the courtroom became heated and filled with anxiety. Inside the courtroom walls, everything continued as usual. The procedures were conducted in a standardized manner, the judges' and prosecutors' voices fluent, precise, and without a single misstep. But outside, the pressure and tension were palpable. Reporters, legal analysts, and the public closely followed every movement and development, creating a suffocating atmosphere surrounding the case. Even within the Reiner family, sources indicated that things were beginning to become unstable. Some relatives were not only focused on punishment, but also worried about whether Nick would receive adequate mental health care alongside the legal process. These issues now transcended the law and evidence, raising difficult questions about family responsibility, transparency, and the true nature of justice. However, no official statement publicly confirmed these concerns, and all information remained from internal sources. The prosecution maintained its firm stance. Prosecutors emphasized that the available evidence fully supported the first-degree murder charge, while also affirming the severity of the case. In their view, Nick's actions following the tragic events fully met the legal criteria for the most serious crime. Because the case involved multiple victims and aggravating circumstances, the scope of punishment was strictly limited. If convicted, Nick Reiner would face only two possibilities: life imprisonment without parole or the death penalty. There were no mitigating circumstances or alternatives. This was the strictest legal framework California could apply. While the courtroom remained silent, the case continued to unfold behind the scenes. Detectives meticulously analyzed every detail, lawyers reviewed legal strategies, and previously undisclosed information quietly circulated within close circles. All involved understood that the next phase would be far more tense and complex. Then all attention gradually shifted to Nick. He couldn't remain silent any longer. Some of his past statements began to resurface and suddenly became more impactful than ever. One of the most shocking revelations was Nick's assessment of his relationship with his father, Rob Reiner. He admitted that he had never truly felt close to his father, and that distance had shaped how he perceived himself within the family. According to Nick, he often felt like an outsider in his own home. While others experienced closeness, love, and warmth in their family relationships, he struggled to find his place. Rob Reiner, according to most sources, was a devoted father, always present for his children, involved in sports, daily activities, and creative hobbies. He also had close relationships with his other children, creating lasting memories and connections. However, Nick's memories of his youth are far more complex. He struggled with substance abuse from ages 15 to 19, undergoing treatment at various rehabilitation centers. These experiences shaped his rebellious and angry personality, leading him to seek identity amidst the chaos. Nick admits that this period was difficult, and he felt a lack of direction, passion, and a sense of self. These personal experiences and contrasting perspectives created an emotional distance from his parents. He emphasizes that this wasn't neglect, but rather how feelings of isolation, inner pressure, and past experiences impacted family relationships. Over time, these experiences shaped Nick's perspective and contributed to the person he became later in life. Conversely, Rob Reiner strived to be the kind of father any child would want. He worked hard, dedicating himself completely to his career and family, but the long hours and pressure of success sometimes inadvertently created emotional voids within the family. Nick grew up surrounded by love, but that love wasn't always delivered in the way he truly needed. Over time, the feeling of emotional deprivation gradually transformed into a silent loneliness, a profound feeling only Nick understood. As he matured, this feeling of distance intensified. Nick began to withdraw, seeking solace elsewhere, places that seemed freer and less controlled. This search led him down dangerous paths. His initial experiments with drugs gradually turned into serious dependence. By age 15, Nick had to enter a rehabilitation center, a heartbreaking but necessary milestone. His family never hid or denied the situation. Rob and Michelle Reiner constantly intervened, taking him to treatment numerous times, relentlessly striving to pull their son out of the destructive spiral of his life. Nick later admitted that the substances he used were powerful and destructive, causing him to struggle to maintain stability for years. His journey followed a painful pattern. Moments of temporary stability offered hope, but were immediately followed by devastating relapses that destroyed everything that had just been built. Each time things seemed to be getting better, the next collapse was even more devastating, not only hurting Nick, but also profoundly affecting those around him. Nick's struggle was not just external but also internal, multi-layered, continuous, and relentless. Previous confessions don't explain the entire tragedy, but they add a complex and haunting layer of context to the story. For years, Nick wandered from state to state, from Maine to New Jersey, then Texas, living in constant uncertainty about his home and shelter. This wasn't a choice or a vacation, but a period of survival filled with risk and chaos. Even so, Rob and Michelle Reiner never gave up on their son. No matter how difficult things got, they patiently maintained contact, remained involved, and supported him every step of the way. Over the years in interviews, they candidly shared Nick's struggles without blame, concealment, or pretense. They poured all their time, love, energy, and finances into helping him. They paid for rehabilitation programs, medical care, treatment, and were always there for calls, visits, and support as Nick overcame setbacks. These efforts never stopped, even when hope seemed lost. At one point, Rob tried a different approach. Instead of keeping work and family separate, he invited Nick into his creative world. In 2015, father and son collaborated on the film Being Charlie, an emotional and authentic story inspired by Nick's own experiences. The film depicts the process of addiction, recovery, and the accompanying difficulties without diminishing the suffering Nick had endured. During the making of the film, Nick showed much more maturity than in previous years. He worked regularly, focused, and seemed to have rediscovered his direction. For the first time, the family felt real hope. Nick had the stability he had lacked, was involved in a creative, orderly environment, and was guided by his father. Those witnessing this change noticed that the chaos that had plagued Nick seemed to temporarily subside. However, that stability did not last. Soon after, Nick relapsed, destroying everything that had just been built. The old patterns returned, including instability, emotional distance, and unpredictable relapse cycles. Each relapse was more difficult than the last, testing not only Nick's strength, but also the patience, love, and resilience of his family. As the years passed, the family's anxieties deepened. The relapse cycles accelerated and became increasingly difficult to manage. What had previously seemed manageable with patience and support now became unpredictable. But no matter how bad things got, Rob and Michelle remained by their son's side, continuing to provide the love, guidance, and support he needed. That love couldn't erase the fear, and for the Reiner family, that fear became very real. They were not only worried about Nick's recovery, but also secretly concerned for their own safety. The emotional distance Nick had described with his father never truly healed, and that wound only added layers of pain to their relationship. Love intertwined with guilt, hope, and disappointment. A lifetime of effort that sometimes yielded unfulfilled results. This is a story about family, about the relentless struggle to save a person, even when reality is sometimes cruel and unpredictable. At that year's Christmas party, the family tension was nothing new. It had been simmering for years, seeping into every moment, every word, every gesture. Sometimes even a glance was enough to weigh down the atmosphere. The argument that night wasn't random, but the inevitable breaking point for a family that had struggled with addiction, relapse, attempts at reconciliation, and deep, unspoken suffering. Each tense conversation, each boundary established, each attempt at help, all were pieces of a long-term picture, shaping Nick's life from a very early age, from childhood, and continuing to influence him for years afterward. The feeling of alienation Nick experienced from childhood followed him into adulthood. It blended with the instability in his life, with the constant struggles with addiction, and with the feeling of never truly finding his place in the family. That emotional distance never faded, and it profoundly affected almost every relationship he had, from friends and colleagues to his closest loved ones. When tragedy struck, with the irreplaceable loss of Rob Reiner and Michelle Singer Reiner, the family finally broke the silence. The first press release was issued by the two surviving children, Romy Reiner and Jake Reiner. They spoke together, and their message stunned many. The words contained no legal details or speculation, but focused entirely on grief, love, and the overwhelming loss. They described the pain as unbearable, creating a heavy silence deeper than any legal argument. Romy and Jake stressed that their parents were the emotional center of the family, the ones who kept everything together when everything around them became chaotic and turbulent. This heartfelt and poignant message reminded the public that behind the sensational headlines lay a broken family, experiencing a private loss that only they could fully understand. From that moment on, the family chose to remain silent. No interviews, no public appearances, no updates. This wasn't avoidance, but a way to protect themselves, to have time and space to process their grief, and to prepare for the next steps. Rob and Michelle's funeral was also private, attended only by close family, longtime friends, and a few trusted colleagues. No cameras, no recordings, no ostentatious speeches. Attendees later described the ceremony as quiet, sincere, and entirely focused on love, remembrance, and human connection, not on fame or achievement. The ceremony became a space of solace, where memories of Rob and Michelle were preserved sacredly and respectfully. Beyond his family, the broader creative community also felt the profound loss. Tributes poured in from across the entertainment industry, from actors and filmmakers to those who had worked with Rob, sharing stories of his influence, not just as a director, but as a mentor and a source of emotional support. They spoke of how Rob created a sense of security on set, encouraging honesty, trust, and creativity. The refrain repeated itself. Rob Reiner was respected not only for his talent, but also for the way he treated people, always humane and compassionate, without ostentation or seeking recognition. As the industry looks back, one thing is clear. Rob's legacy is not defined by glamour or external noise, but by the connections he made with people, by the emotions and the stories he told. His films leave a lasting impression because of their authenticity and emotional depth, not relying on glitz and glamour, but focusing on people, dialogue, and everyday moments. The Princess Bride remains a timeless masterpiece, blending humor, sincerity, adventure, and emotion. Stand By Me continues to be praised for its realistic portrayal of friendship and coming of age. When Harry Met Sally redefined romantic storytelling, focusing on genuine dialogue rather than cliches. Decades later, audiences still cite and return to these films, a testament to the enduring vitality and profound influence of the stories Rob Reiner told. Ultimately, Rob Reiner's legacy lies not in the number of projects he undertook, but in the lives he touched, the stories he helped tell, and the quiet way he reminded people that sometimes the simplest moments are the most important. It is these seemingly insignificant moments that possess profound and lasting power. While the legal battle continues with many unanswered questions, one thing is undeniable: the family has lost a foundation, and the world has lost a storyteller whose work will live on, transcending everyday news and events. Rob Reiner will be remembered not only for his outstanding achievements, but also for his unwavering dedication to detail. He was always punctual, meticulously prepared, trusted his actors, and kept the film's focus on people and genuine emotions, rather than relying on sensational scenes or artificial glamour. The strength of his films stems from authenticity, from the genuine people on screen. Alongside her husband's illustrious career, Michelle Singer Reiner is also remembered with equal respect. She lived away from the spotlight, but her presence was strong and quiet. She dedicated her life to her family, to charitable work, and to maintaining the bonds of loved ones. It was her quiet strength that held everything together, keeping the family strong through life's ups and downs. Those closest to them described Rob and Michelle as true-life partners, sharing decades of love, purpose, and unwavering devotion. As tributes continued to pour in from all corners, the contrast between Rob's public legacy and the family's private pain became clearer than ever. Hollywood, once celebrating his achievements, now witnessed a tense legal battle involving the family. There is no clear boundary between those two worlds. Legacy and tragedy, joy and sorrow, they are intricately intertwined. Public remembrance exists alongside private grief. While the entertainment industry shares warm memories and heartfelt tributes, the Reiner family remains immersed in profound loss. Legal proceedings continue. Quiet memorials remind us that behind every headline, every court filing, are real people: parents, spouses, friends, people who shaped countless lives. The absence of Rob and Michelle resonates in the industry, in their communities, and in the hearts of those who loved them. Cameras pan away, courtroom lights dim, but the loss remains, heavy and painful. So now the question is, what will you do? Do you really believe that everything that happened was solely Nick Reiner's responsibility, or is there something else lurking behind the scenes? Does this story have more meaning than what we see in the headlines? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We want to hear from you. And if this story has captivated you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more in-depth analyses of celebrities and the most shocking stories. Click the notification bell to not miss any new content. Continue watching the next video on your screen to discover more details and dramatic stories about celebrities that you won't want to miss.